Welcome back to She Can, where women lead with their stories. They lead by example, by explaining how they got to where they are today, to be mentors and role models, because it's easier to be what you can see. And I'm very excited and honored to be talking to Lynn Barton today. Lynn, welcome to She Can. You're a British aviator who was the first woman pilot employed by British Airways in 1987. In 2008, you were the first pilot to fly an aircraft into London's Heathrow Terminal 5, which was a huge thing. You started flying lessons at the age of 16 and became the first female pilot full-time at the age of 30 in 1987, flying Boeing 747s. You were also part of a BBC documentary called Jet Jockeys, where they were following a flight to Bangkok and then on to Sydney. Within a year, there were 60 of the 3,000 pilots that were women. You're obviously someone who made history. You're leading with your story. You did a talk at British Airways last week about exactly that. Lynn, tell us a little bit what it means to you for making history like this.
Well, it was always my dream. If you'd asked me at the age of 6 or 7 what my dream was, it would have been to be an airline pilot. If you asked me at 16, 17 what my dream would be, it would have been to be a captain on the jumbo, which at that time it was pre-employment equality legislation in the UK. So it would have been an impossible dream, I felt. But gradually along the way, I didn't really set out to climb a mountain. I set out to do each step along the way. And then I realized I could do the next step and the next step. And although I made history, of which I'm incredibly proud, and my family are incredibly proud, I have to say I'm almost slightly disappointed that more girls haven't come along. There's still when I started to fly in the 1970s, 3 to 5% of aviators were female around the world. And when I retired in the 2010s, it had only reached 5 to 7% throughout the world. India is a bit of an outlier with 15%. Nobody really knows why. We'd love to find out why. So although I'm very proud of making history, I'm slightly disappointed that my history making and the girls that came immediately after me haven't made a bigger dent in the employment of female pilots. I think it's a wonderful thing. I had a fantastic career, and still, even British Airways, which is very positive, it was a very positive working environment, they still only have about 7% female pilots. And from my experience of working there, that's not because they don't want to recruit them. It's because the girls, for some reason, girls, ladies, females, however you want to put it, they don't put themselves forward. They don't seem to want to do the career. Girls go to be firefighters, girls go to be doctors, girls go to do all those things. But for some reason, flying still has this, in the UK, we would call it this sort of Biggles element of daring do. And girls don't think it's for them. And it's a marvelous career, very well suited, in fact, if you're doing a family responsibilities, to part-time work. It absolutely fits into part-time work much better than other high-flying careers like a doctor or a solicitor or barrister, because when you go to work, you work for a week, then when you finish that work, you don't take the work home with you because, somebody else flies that aeroplane. So, yes, I'm very proud of the history making I did. I didn't find it that hard a work, to be honest. I do think I was lucky with my timing. I've come along at a time when the legislation went in my favour, and big airlines like British Airways were very positive. They wanted to go out there and get a diversified workforce for all the good reasons that that's good. But I'm a bit disappointed over my lifetime. It hasn't made more difference, really.
Yeah, I can understand that and I can see that. Lynn, you became a captain in 1996 and you retired in 2016. Tell us a tiny bit more about that journey. And you said you were just going from one thing to the next and you knew you could do it. What do you feel? What pivotal points do you remember where you really thought, yeah, I'm gonna be a captain. I'm gonna do this. And how do you feel you've changed the work environment being a woman pilot?
Well, actually, the pivotal moment for me was before I joined British Airways, when I realized I could earn my living as a pilot.
Mm,
Initially, it was as a flying instructor. And then once I was a flying instructor, I realized I could get a commercial license. And flying is very egalitarian once you're qualified.
yeah.
It's not like the business world where there are different rates of pay, and you could lose a contract or things. Once you get into a reasonable sized airline, you, as long as you pass all the tests and you're the right standard, you just walk along the path, and when there's a vacancy for a captain, you apply for it. So once I was commercially qualified, I always thought I would make it along the path to becoming a captain. Once I got into British Airways, that was another pivotal moment, because for me, the jumbo was the dream, the Boeing 747. And when I already had jet experience when I got into British Airways in 87. So when I got straight in onto the Boeing 747, that was quite a pivotal moment in my career, that I felt it was only onwards and upwards. I've always had quite a lot of faith in myself, in that I would pass the tests, I would maintain the standard. So that wasn't any problem. And so therefore, I just knew I was on the path. I was with British Airways. There was a moment, because before British Airways, I'd been in two airlines. And in 1990-91, there was the Gulf War
Yeah.
and a downturn in aviation. And actually, on the news, on the television, British Airways announced that they unfortunately had 10% too many pilots. And they were going to have to do something about that. They were in negotiations with the union. And I thought, having only been in 3 years, it's going to be tough now, going to have to find another job, see how it goes. And I actually realized at that point in time, when I joined British Airways, they only had 2,000 pilots, because they were recruiting. And by the time 1990 came around, they actually had 3,000 pilots.
Mm,
So that was, on a personal level, a pivotal moment, because I suddenly thought, wow, barring something even worse, I am now in a career with British Airways. I'm set on that path. Then I carried on flying the jumbo, and in 96, each year you're invited to apply for being in command. And it didn't look like it was coming close to me, because you just wait. It's just a numbers game. They look along and see that it's a female pilot. It's purely a numbers game. Very good in that way. But I particularly like long haul. And there was actually a base for the 767 medium haul out of Manchester. And a lot of my colleagues didn't apply for that. So that actually went a bit junior that year. And that's when I got my first command. But that required training for 3 months at Heathrow on the Boeing 757 before you were transferred up to Manchester. So that in its way was quite a pivotal moment for me, because I was going in to and from. It was quite quick training, couple of months, and I was going in and out of Heathrow Airport wearing a captain's uniform and flying around short haul around Europe. And that was a sort of summer that you thought, wow, I've made it. Actually, that summer in August 96, the first time I flew with a female first officer within a month of qualifying, because that was just how the rosters fell. And I find it quite funny nowadays when people publicize all-female flight deck crews. When British Airways considered it so routine, we just did it. We turned up for work in August 96, female first officer. We did a tour, several sectors around Europe, and that was it, a done deal. So that was another moment when you thought, oh, yes, it's going well. So that was how that continued. And then once I was in command, I moved to the 777 in 2000, and then in 2004 I moved back to the jumbo, partly for the route structure, partly for all of that, but partly as a personal pat on the back. I've made it. That's just a personal thing. I mean, there's nothing against the captains on any other type, but that was my personal achievement. And so along the way, there were several moments where you thought, yes, I've made it. It was almost a bit like a dream because my family knew it. But in British Airways, they didn't make a big fuss about you being a female pilot. So long as you met the standard, you met the standard. And that's refreshing as a working environment. And it enables you. And of course, then once you're there, you just you bid for your work, you do different work. I bid for the operation into Terminal 5 because I personally was fascinated by Terminal 5. We'd done several look-see days where we went and looked and saw the operation. So when the opportunity came up to say, I'd like to do the first flight in, I bid for it. And I was quite gobsmacked, if you understand that expression, because I got it. Yeah. Afterwards, I did get a phone call from a management pilot saying if I would like to not do the flight and be paid for it, he would be happy to do the flight himself. And I said, no, thank you. I bid for that flight. So and not to do him down, but I do strongly suspect he got his dates wrong and he forgot to apply for the first operation into Terminal 5. That was quite a moment in my career because it wasn't based around being a female. It was based around when we landed from Hong Kong. It was dark because it was a very early morning arrival, and we'd timed our flight and we taxied in quite slowly so that we got on stand 1 at Terminal 5 at precisely the minute of our arrival time. And the whole of Terminal 5 was lit up, and you could see people in all the windows taking flash photography, trying to get a picture of the aircraft coming in. The chairman or CEO of British Airways met the flight. Every passenger got a commemorative pen. That was, in its own way, really quite a fabulous moment. Partly, I think, because it wasn't based around being a female, it was based around being a pilot of a jumbo and getting that tremendous flight to do. So I don't know if that answers your question. It was a bit rambling, but
no, it was great, Lynn. And I can see that British Airways has a really good work culture and they're very inclusive. And you were a pilot, full stop. You weren't a female pilot. And I think that's the future of how we should lead companies and ventures and politics in general. It's just that we are so underrepresented, under-researched, underfunded in so many areas still that we constantly have to, hyphenate and make sure that we know this is a woman who's doing it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I was going to say, during my time in British Airways, they asked me, because I'd been on their cadet training program and I did all full selection for that. And then I did the full selection to get into British Airways. They actually asked me once I was flying a couple of times. They were aware, they thought maybe females were being put off by the selection procedure. And they asked me to come along. I did 2 or 3 days back at the Cranebank Centre doing the full selection procedure, because they were trying to see if intrinsically in the selection procedure there was something that didn't favour females. They never wanted, and British Airways have never wanted to employ anybody who didn't meet the standard. But what they explained to me was, if you want to employ the best of the best, you need everybody to apply so you can pick the best of the best.
Yeah.
And if 50% of your population basically rules themselves out of applying generally, you're not getting the best of the best. Yeah. And so that was quite fascinating, because the selection procedure was very, I think, taken from the military, but I didn't detect anything that was really intrinsically not conducive to a female passing the test. So that these things are quite fascinating. And in the recent past, as you say, in British Airways, there was no question that you always had to meet the standard, but they were very confident if enough girls applied that they would meet the standard, just in the same way that when all the boys apply, they don't all meet the standard. Some get rejected and some don't. But actually, a greater proportion of the girls who apply do meet the standard, because so few apply, if you see what I mean. Yeah. They self-select before they even get to the application procedure, whereas boys might apply with just as a sort of an aside. They think it might be an interesting thing to do. But if you girls think it might be an interesting thing to do, they're normally much more dedicated to the idea of flying as a career before they even come up for selection.
Yeah, and I think it's a fact across industries that girls apply and they really hit 100% of the prerequisites, whereas boys and men often apply, they don't meet, and they think, oh, it'll be fine, I'll be fine, you know, I will learn this. And I think that's something that we as girls and women have to emulate a little bit to get numbers up in general. Lynn, what tips would you give younger girls these days that might have the same dream you had? They look up in the air, they see the planes, they want to be a pilot, they want to be a captain. What tips would you have for them?
One of the tips I would have for them, which is much easier nowadays with the internet, is to go on the internet, do your research, and find mentors or examples. I was very lucky at one point, because when I was learning to fly, somebody mentioned the British Women Pilots Association, which is just a small association. But joining that, you got the newsletter and you saw stories and you saw people who'd done it. Along the way, that's what's encouraged me, is seeing other people. They're all capable of it. And one of the other things which I would like to address, but I don't know how you address it, is I meet a lot of people who would like to fly, and a lot of females seem to assume that science or maths is not in their ballpark. It's not something they can naturally do. And then if you sit down with them and talk about the level of science and the level of maths that you might do in any other job, they realize it isn't beyond them. So I would encourage them not to be put off science and maths, what we call the STEM subjects, science, technology. I think that's getting better with computers, but I would like them to look at that with an open mind and also look around. And once you start looking around for mentors and stories, I got one scholarship along the way to help me pay for my flying instructor rating. And I heard about that through the British Women Pilots Association. They do sponsorships. There's the Guild of Air Pilots, different things. I would get flying magazines, look on things, never give up, of course, because even if it doesn't work out quite as you want, you can have a career in what you love. And if what you love is aviation, keep plugging away at it. Keep trying, keep thinking, don't be put off. I think it's better nowadays, but yes, I have heard all the remarks in the world, and just bat them back. Just bat them back and read the stories about the ones who, I would flatter myself, like myself, who did bat them back and it didn't stop them. So that's what I would say. Encourage yourself emotionally by looking for stories, and intellectually do not be put off by, because the level of science in all these things is not highbrow. Don't be put off by the idea that you're not scientific or you're not mathematic, because those, if you've got the willingness, can definitely be learnt. Don't put off by those. That's the two things I would say.
Yeah, excellent advice, Lynn. Thank you so much. Lynn, what would you say are your main lessons of making history, of doing the career that you did for a long time?
I made lessons. Just keep plugging away. It you can do well, as your podcast is. She can, I can, anybody can. With a bit of willingness and hard work, we all can. And my other lesson is that if you do follow your dream, whichever way it takes you, it's fabulous. Because to go to work or live your life, your adult life, with a smile on your face is absolutely the best way to live it.
Yeah,
so that's what.
And that's also being a really positive role model. Now, Lynn, you've been alluding to it. You have been leading as a female pilot around the world, especially within British Airways. What type of leader do you think you were or you are, and what was important to you?
I think I'm quite a positive leader. I think I'm quite commanding. I do get an idea, and I like to gather people around me and follow through on that idea. I also, we were very hard in British Airways on looking at how you coordinate a crew, what we call crew resource management. And I think I'm quite good at that. You've got to lead a crew, but you've also got to take on board all their doubts and worries so that you've got the best picture possible. And I think I'm particularly good at that. In fact, I liked it so much and enjoyed it. Once I was a captain, I did actually for a few years go back into Heathrow once a month and go on the cabin crew, flight attendants training days to sit in for an afternoon. They liked having a pilot there to talk about emergency procedures and how you interact with people. So I think that's my strongest strength. I love flying, of course, and I'm willing to learn anything to fly an aeroplane, whatever it requires. But my strength when I'm flying the aeroplane, and the reason I had a good career with British Airways, is I fit that role model for a pilot, a good commanding pilot, I think quite well. Yeah. And I'm also very unusual in the female world for thinking that and patting myself on the back. So that's another thing I think females could learn to do. Recognize your strengths. And when I'm recognizing that strength, then when I look into CRM, I also look at anything that gives me a weakness, because you can be too commanding. You can be so positive and confident at what you're doing that nobody questions you. When you ask them, is that okay? They all think, well, she's so good at it. I won't. So the weakness in that you have to look at is not to be too commanding, if that doesn't sound a bit wayward, but that's the weakness in my thing. But that's what I think my personality lends itself to.
Yeah, to finding that balance. Lynn, so let's go back to those challenges. What were the challenges and how did you reframe them and continue on your path?
Well, along the way, the challenges were before I joined British Airways, I was very hard up financially, because being a flying instructor and paying for flying training was very hard up. And so those challenges, you needed to love flying to go along those challenges. Along the way, I've never actually flown with a training captain that was nasty towards me, but I have come into contact with some people who made remarks. When I was flying training, there was a very senior training captain at the flying school who actually went out of his way to sit and have a chat with me. I never flew with him, but he had a chat with me and explained to me that it was all very well flying a single-engined aeroplane, but that he was very confident I wouldn't be able to handle the twin-engined aeroplane and the emergencies on that. And he thought I was doing very well, very well. But I should be prepared for the fact that I shouldn't do that. What he didn't realize was that it is in my nature, when I'm told something like that, that it makes me more determined. It makes me so determined that if I failed at it, they would, to forgive the expression, they would certainly know I was there, that I'd had a go at it, you know. I floated through all of that in that way because I was so determined. And along the way, I have found when I was standing at the check-in desk getting my paperwork for one of my first flights out of Heathrow as a captain, and it was very unusual even to see a female pilot at that time, and there were no female captains. There was a crusty old captain standing alongside me at the desk who I think he thought it was amusing inside his head, I'm not sure, but he turned to me and said, "So, what is a female captain doing here at Heathrow?" Well, of course, that's not a good thing to say to me because I'm quite feisty. And so I turned to him and said, "She's taking a 757 to Berlin when you get out of her way. What are you doing?" And to give him his due, that was quite sharp. He went red to apologize profusely and sort of shuffled away from the desk. And I just laughed it off because everybody was waiting to see if I was going to do something about that. So along the way, the personal challenges, I've always loved flying so much. I don't consider the training courses or anything a personal challenge because I loved that challenge. And I have had people make remarks. And as I say, once I was qualified, I am quite a character that doesn't suffer fools gladly, and certainly quite confident in my own ability. So I have been, along the way, as I say, handed them back in same measure. And of course, the timing was good because those people who say those sorts of things, they might think it inside their head. There might be men going around thinking that inside their head now, but it has long been not socially acceptable to say it out loud. Yeah. And so when I pull them up on it, everybody around me supports me, and they go off and think, oh, and they'll always apologize. So those are the only challenges, and that I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Lynn. And so what plans or goals do you have? You're retired, you had a very fulfilling career with so many highs. You are doing talks about it now. Is there anything for you on the horizon?
Not particularly. I am doing some talks now about my career, and my big interest at the moment is I do love traveling. One of the advantages of my flying career was I love flying and I love traveling. So I'm going on cruises a lot now. On a personal level, I have an ambition that I will think will be unfulfilled. I still fly light aircraft, and I do about 20 hours a year. I fly an aircraft I've got a share in and at a local airfield. And actually, my flying hours are just about 19,800. So at 20 or 25 hours a year, I would have loved to have got to 20,000 just because it's a thing, but I don't think I will. So that's one of those things. I'll carry on flying as long as I can, but that would be nice. And the other thing I want to do, which all pilots want to do, I think, is fly in a Spitfire. So that's my ambition for this year. There are some Spitfire simulators, which I hope to go into for an hour or two, so that when I get my half-hour flight in the Spitfire, like all pilots, I want to be able to see everything that's going on, not just sit there open mouthed as I might do if I just went up in the Spitfire, but I'd go in the simulator first so that I can really appreciate the flight in the simulator. So that's my short-term ambition. And that's about it, really. Seeing my grandchildren, they're 16 and 18, and all of those sorts of things are enjoyable. But yes, that's about it for my future ambitions.
Lynn, and what would you like our listeners to take away from your story?
Well, exactly as your thing says, you can do it. If it's flying or whatever you want to do, just keep plugging away at it and do it. If you love it, make it your life and work at it, because it's whatever it turns out at. If you love what you're doing, and then when you're working, you're smiling, that's the best way to be.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for your time, for your leadership, for your story, for representing something so important, and also now knowing that there are still not huge amounts of women in the aviation industry to do talks and to try and encourage girls to go into that direction.
Thank you.